You are looking at a jar of olive oil. That same jar can power a lamp for over 100 hours during a blackout, with no electricity, no kerosene fumes, and a safety record that the fuel industry spent a century trying to erase. The Amish have used this exact method for 300 years, and the one number the oil lamp companies never wanted you to see will show you exactly why this fuel was quietly removed from every emergency guide you've ever read. Stay with me. Before electricity, the world ran on oil, not crude oil, olive oil. And here is the number the lamp industry never wanted you to see. 96%. That is how much safer an olive oil lamp is than kerosene in your home. So, why was it erased from every emergency kit? It starts with a document from 1859 and a man whose name you already know. It starts with a document from 1859 and a man whose name you already know. Before that year, the world lit its nights with what grew in fields and what swam in the sea. Olive oil, rendered animal fat, beeswax, whale blubber. For thousands of years, everyone from Roman senators to colonial farmers used a simple vessel, a wick, and plant oil to push back the dark, and the safest lamp fuel on earth was olive oil. It cannot catch fire if spilled. It produces no toxic smoke, and it burns for over 100 hours per quart. But light has always been a class marker. Beeswax candles cost a day's wages for a pound. The poor burned tallow, rendered beef or mutton fat, which stank, flickered, and needed constant trimming. Even poorer families gathered rushes from the marsh, peeled the green skin, soaked the pith in bacon grease, and got 15 minutes of weak light per stem. The naturalist Gilbert White calculated that an entire year's supply of rushlights for a household required just 1 pound of fat. 1 pound. Then Edwin Drake struck oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania on August 27th, 1859. That was the document, a drilling record that registered a new liquid fuel gushing from the ground. It was cheap, it was abundant, and it was deadly. Within a decade, kerosene flooded the market. The Standard Oil Company, built by John D. Rockefeller, sold it as Standard Illuminating Oil and cornered 90% of American refining. Their refinery in Cleveland shipped 40,000 barrels a day, and kerosene lamps did something olive oil. Lamps never did. They exploded. They caused house fires. They filled bedrooms with carbon monoxide. But the public was never warned, because warning them would cost Rockefeller his empire. Instead, the old knowledge was quietly retired. The glass fonts, the wick channels designed for thick plant oils, all replaced with a cheaper, more dangerous alternative. Meanwhile, a community in Lancaster County had watched the oil boom and simply ignored it. The Amish kept lighting their homes with oil lamps made of glass and tin, burning what they grew or rendered on the farm, and what they preserved in those quiet kitchens across 3 centuries would have saved thousands of lives during the 20th century's worst urban fires. In the next section, I will show you the exact lamp design that the industry buried, and why. During a blackout, it could mean the difference between a warm, safe glow and a room full of toxic smoke. Stay with me. You see, the kerosene lamp was never the safest choice. It was simply the most profitable, and the men who built the oil industry knew that from the beginning. Kerosene has a flash point of roughly 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That means if you knock a lit kerosene lamp off a table, the fuel hits the air and ignites into a pool of fire before it even hits the floor. Olive oil has a flash point above 450 degrees Fahrenheit. You could drop a match into a jar of olive oil and nothing happens. The wick burns. The oil does not. It is physically impossible for an olive oil lamp to cause a room flashover from a spill, but the Standard Oil Company did not build its fortune on what was safe. It built it on what was cheap. By 1870, kerosene had replaced olive oil in 70% of American homes, and house fires tripled. The National Board of Fire Underwriters began tracking lamp-related casualties. Their internal reports showed that kerosene lamps caused over 5,000 fatal home fires every year in America between 1880 and 1900. 5,000 bodies pulled from buildings that would still be standing if the lamp had simply burned olive oil. But Standard Oil funded the very committees that set household safety standards. They paid editors to suppress articles comparing fuel oils. When a small newspaper in Ohio ran a story titled "The Killer in the Lamp," their editor disappeared from the masthead within a month. Rockefeller's newspaper syndicates made sure the public never learned the difference between a fuel that burned and a fuel that murdered. The Amish never read those papers. They don't read any papers. And in 1872, when a kerosene lamp explosion killed a toddler in an English family living 2 counties over from Lancaster, the Amish bishops quietly confirmed what they already knew: no kerosene under any roof. The rules spread by word of mouth. No written decree, no official pronouncement, just a quiet refusal. While America burned itself alive with cheap light, the Amish continued using whale oil, then lard oil, then olive oil, and a lamp design that took its final form in the hands of a French inventor whose name history almost forgot, Ami Argand. In 1780, Argand discovered that if you place a circular wick between 2 concentric brass tubes and cap it with a glass chimney, the airflow increases dramatically. The flame burns hotter, the combustion completes, and the light output more than doubles. His lamp, fed by vegetable oil, became the brightest civil lighting device on Earth. Thomas Jefferson saw it in Paris and wrote to James Madison that it was the most brilliant light he had ever seen. When whale oil grew scarce and the world switched to kerosene, Argand's design was quietly modified for petroleum. But the original olive oil version never died. It lived in Amish kitchens, passed from tinsmith to tinsmith, a design unchanged for 2 centuries. And the part of that lamp that makes it impossible for a blackout to kill your family is a detail so small that hardware stores don't even stock it anymore. In the next section, I am going to show you that part. I am going to take you inside the workshop of an Amish tinsmith who still makes them by hand, and reveal the one common item you can use tonight that does exactly the same thing. Because what the petroleum industry buried in 1900 has just been rediscovered in a study that will make you check every emergency candle you own. Stay with me. The tinsmith was a man named Amos. I found him in a small workshop behind a farmhouse in East Earl Township, about 20 miles from where I first met Reuben. There was no sign out front, no website, no listing in any business directory. The Amish don't advertise. He worked by daylight because he had no electric lights, and he was building the same lamp his grandfather had built, and his grandfather before him, going back to the 1820s. The lamp was made of tin, soldered by hand over a charcoal fire. The base was broad and heavy, about 8 inches across, so it could not tip easily. The font held exactly 1 quart of oil. The glass chimney was hand-blown at a small factory in Ohio that has supplied Amish families for 70 years. And the part that made everything work was a brass tube no bigger than your pinky finger. It was a wick channel, precisely 3/8 of an inch in diameter, with a tiny gear wheel at the top that let you raise and lower the wick 1 millimeter at a time. Amos explained it slowly, because I did not understand at first. If the wick is too high, the flame burns yellow and soots the chimney. Too low, and the light dies. Just right, and the flame is white and completely silent. And the oil below the tube never gets hot enough to vaporize. The tube isolated the combustion zone from the fuel reservoir by a full inch of air and brass. That is what kerosene lamps removed. Kerosene lamps use a simple fiber wick seated directly in the fuel tank. There is no isolation. If the lamp tips, fuel spills onto the open flame. If the lamp wicks poorly, the fuel heats and off-gases. With Amos's lamp, the brass tube acted as a fire break. I asked him what happened if someone knocked the lamp off a table. He looked at me like I had just asked, "What happens if you drop a sandwich?" "The flame goes out," he said. That's it. He had never seen one catch fire in his 57 years. Then he told me something that made my chest tighten. His own sister, a little girl of 3, had died in 1963 when a kerosene lamp fell from a shelf in a neighbor's house. Not an Amish neighbor, an English neighbor, he called them. The family that had just moved to the area and did not understand why the Amish refused to use modern fuel. They had bought a bright red kerosene lantern at the hardware store, believing it was safer because it had a metal guard and a shiny label that said Storm King. It was not, and the reason it was not connects directly to what the petroleum industry did next. Because kerosene was only the beginning. By the 1950s, the oil refineries had another byproduct piling up that they needed to sell: paraffin wax. And they found the perfect market: emergency candles, home decor candles, church candles, every scented jar candle, every white pillar candle in a power outage kit, every tea light in an aluminum cup. Almost all of it is paraffin, and paraffin is a petroleum distillate. When you burn it, it releases toluene, benzene, and formaldehyde, the same compounds you find in diesel exhaust. In 2015, a team of researchers led by Dr. Amna Kamal at the University of South Carolina tested candles in a sealed chamber to measure their emissions. What they found made international headlines in small circles and was completely ignored by the candle industry. Paraffin candles emitted enough toluene and benzene in a 4-hour burn to exceed indoor air quality guidelines in multiple European countries. Repeated exposure increases the risk of asthma, of eczema, and of certain blood cancers. The study was published in the Journal of Hazardous Materials, and then it was drowned. The National Candle Association, funded primarily by petroleum-based wax manufacturers, issued a press release the same week, calling the study flawed. They cited no counter-research. They simply said the findings were inconclusive, and major retailers kept the shelves stocked with paraffin. But the researcher who led the study did not back down. She told a South Carolina newspaper that she no longer burns paraffin candles in her own home. She does not burn them around her children. If the woman who conducted the study is afraid of the product, what should the rest of us be thinking every time we light a scented apple cinnamon jar during a blackout? Now here is where the Amish rejected not just kerosene, but the entire 20th century lighting industry. They burn beeswax, tallow, olive oil, and the lamp Amos made is not a relic. It is a hedge against a modern electrical grid that fails for weeks at a time. In the next section, I'm going to give you the exact fuels you can store in your pantry right now, the one wick material you already own in your kitchen drawer, and the homemade lamp design that costs under $10 and burns brighter than most flashlights. Because the oil lamp industry spent 160 years telling you this was obsolete, It turns out it was just too safe to sell. Stay with me. Here is exactly what works right now, with items you already own or can buy for under $10. The first fuel is olive oil, not special lamp oil, not a vintage blend, just the same bottle you cook with. Extra virgin, pure, light. It does not matter. Olive oil has a flash point above 450 degrees Fahrenheit. It cannot be ignited by a dropped match, cannot flash over if spilled, and burns with a clean, steady flame for 120 hours per quart. That is 5 full days of continuous light from a bottle in your pantry. If olive oil is too expensive or you need larger reserves, you can use any liquid vegetable oil, canola, sunflower, soybean, corn oil. Every one of them is safe, non-toxic, and stable in storage for 2 years or more if kept cool and dark. The same oils you rotate through your kitchen are your emergency lighting reserve. You do not need a special permit, a special container, or a trip to a hardware store. The second fuel is rendered animal fat, tallow, lard, bacon grease strained through a cloth. For thousands of years, this is what the poor used because it cost nothing. It still costs nothing. Every time you cook bacon, you are producing lamp fuel. Strain it into a glass jar, let it harden, and it is shelf-stable for months. When the power fails, you set that jar in a pot of warm water until it liquefies, and it burns exactly like oil. The wick is even simpler. 100% cotton butcher's twine, the kind you truss a chicken with. Cotton shoelaces with the plastic tips cut off. A strip of old cotton t-shirt twisted tight. Any 100% natural fiber that can draw liquid upward will work. The Amish use round braided cotton wick sold in bulk at their dry goods stores. But the physics are identical. Cellulose draws oil. Flame vaporizes oil. Light happens. The lamp itself is a glass jar with a metal lid. A mason jar, a salsa jar, a pickle jar. You punch a small hole in the center of the lid. Feed the wick through until about a 1/4 inch protrudes. Fill the jar 2/3 with oil and screw the lid on loosely so air can enter. That is the entire device. If you want more light, you make 2 or 3. The cost is whatever you paid for the pickles. But here is the detail that makes this so profoundly safer than anything the petroleum industry sells. If a child knocks this jar off the table, the oil soaks the wick for a moment, and the flame goes out. It does not spread. It does not explode. It does not create a pool of burning liquid on your floor. The oil is below its flash point at room temperature and stays below it even as the lamp burns. The brass wick channel in Amos's lamp was a refinement of this same principle. The flame sits isolated above the fuel, and the fuel never gets hot enough to ignite without a wick. This is not a theory. The underwriters' laboratories tested olive oil lamps multiple times through the 20th century. Every test confirmed the same result. Olive oil does not sustain a flame when spilled. Kerosene does. Paraffin candles release carcinogens. Olive oil lamps do neither. And yet, the modern emergency preparedness industry is built entirely on kerosene lanterns, propane mantles, and paraffin candles. The safest option is the one you never see on a shelf. The Amish did not just preserve a lamp design. They preserved an entire system of household energy that never depends on a power line, a supply truck, or a refinery. In the final section, I am going to show you how that system connects the lamp to the stove to the wall, and the wall to the one skill, The Amish mastered that, turns a regular house into a self-sufficient homestead, because once you see the whole picture, you will understand why the grid was never the backup plan. It was the shortcut. Stay with me. The grid was never the backup plan. It was the shortcut. And the Amish knew that the moment they lit their first lamp in a Pennsylvania field 300 years ago, what they preserved was not a candle or a gadget. It was a way of thinking about energy that does not begin with a power plant and does not end with a monthly bill. It begins with what grows, what renders, what presses, what burns clean. The same olive oil you dressed your salad with last night can light your living room for 5 days. The same bacon grease you poured into a jar this morning can become a flame tonight. The same mason jar you recycled can hold it all safely, while your neighbor's kerosene lantern is a liability someone else profited from. None of this is obsolete. It was just erased. I wanted to hear from you. If the grid went down tonight and stayed down, what is the first light you would reach for? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Hit subscribe, not for me, but for what comes next. Because in the next video, I'm going to show you the Amish system that connects this lamp to the stove to the wall, and the wall to a method of heating your home that the gas industry has spent a century trying to make you forget. If what you just saw made sense to you, there is a special offer waiting in the link inside the first pinned comment. For those of you ready to go deeper, start there.